So what's up? Welcome to the Dissection, a Numbers with H. Dakari series where we're dissecting the numerology behind some of your favorite musicians and public figures. I'm your host, H. Dakari, conglomerated numerologist and astrologer, but by all means call me Ace. And in this episode, we are dissecting Smino, not only his first album, or I guess this is his first album. Was that his first album? Black Swan, where we're dissecting that album all the way up to the most recent drop, Love for Rent. So if you're liking what you're hearing, make sure you share it on your socials and tag me at YourSoulLab or at Numbers with H. Dakari on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. Head over to YourSoulLaboratory.com to check out the interactive blog post, to highlight all the numbers that I'm talking about and everything else. All the direct links are in the description of this episode, but let's go ahead and get into it. So Smino was born October 2nd, 1991, which is a Wednesday, making him a pure psychic 2, a destiny exalted 5, simplified from a 23, and a name number 2 simplified from a 20. He was born in a universal 2 year, and I really like all these 2s because that puts him in a position where he's highly empathetic, very charismatic, and very intuitive, but also can be very in tune with his emotions, which is great for creativity, and also 2 highlights creativity as well. With that name number 2, we've seen this before, of it puts artists in positions where people love them for how they make them feel, how their music makes them feel. And that is very true with Smino's work, of just the unique escapism but flow, and just also a little grounding. Like it's very unique, the vibe that you get from his music, and you can only get it from him, and that's very much what a name number 2 would do. With his pure psychic 2, he's very, like, again, empathetic, caring, and determined, and can be naturally patient, but that can also change really quick because 2 has this hidden complexity that puts it in a position where you might not know its next move. You might not see it, you might not peep. And like, if you think about like how like the moon like controls the tides, and sometimes those tides go from really calm and just steady moving to, hey yo, it's a tsunami in this bitch. 2 can embody that drastic shift from 0 to 100 real quick. So there's also that level of complexity, but also with people with such heavy 2 energy, because 2 is a part of all of his base numbers, his psychic, his destiny, and his name. All of those numbers, boundaries are very, very important for him. Boundaries and balance, very, very key. So I like, especially with his numbers, I would say that balance of his thoughts and emotions are key, and not letting everybody get so close. He does have a really big heart with that too. And with that too, not only being his psychic, but also being supplementary in his destiny 5, exalted 5, it puts it in a completely different long-term presentness of his heart is his core. Like, of course you would think that anyway, but his heart is really, really, really true to who he is. And I think that needs to be protected at all costs, sort of, kind of. With that 5, he's naturally inquisitive and curious, and like a very strong word with relationships, whether good or bad. But considering he's a musician and a lyricist, I would say it's pretty good, if I do say so myself. So there's with 5 especially, there's a tendency to be inconsistent or restless or anxious. And with the rest of his numbers, with that supplementary 2 and that supplementary 3, 3 also highlights restlessness in a way. So I'm not surprised if he does experience anxiety or really overwhelming thoughts, or his emotions can become very overwhelming for him. There's just like a natural scatteredness and hyper independence and perfectionism that comes with that supplementary 3, and also that dominant 5. So it can be a little complex. 5 is ruled by Mercury, 2 is ruled by the moon, as we know, and 3 is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is this really, really big energy, and when it sits supplementary, it just really supports whatever that dominant number is and just makes it larger than life. So in this case, since it's at 5, his mind is really where it's at. His mind in that internal space, because that's really what 5 highlights, is that internal mental space. That's where everything's rolling, that's where everything moves, and we got to really make sure that that's stable. So I hope that he puts a lot of 1s, 2s, 5s, and 8s in his releases. 1, because it works well with his psychic and name, and anywhere there's a 2 in it. And also works well with 5 due to the fact that 5 reflects itself, and 1 is the beginning, and 1 reflects 9, and 5 sits in between, right in the middle between those 2 numbers. So I would say 1, it's ruled by the sun. It also is solar energy, which is opposite than his lunar energy of that 2. I would also say 2 because the dominance of 2. I'd say 5 because that's his destiny number, and then 8 because since there's so many natal 2s in his numbers, 8 is reflects the number 2. So I would feel as though that it would put him in a position where he's getting more balance and also stability, because 5 is a very internalized energy. So is 2. 2 can be internalized, but it also has an ability to take what it's feeling, that empathy, and share and like be like, okay, let me take this empathy and do something with it. Whereas 5 will analyze, like look at every little detail and be like, let's sit on this. And it's like the thoughts don't really go anywhere. They don't really leave, and they'll just sort of kind of stay inside. So hopefully with that 8 being ruled by Saturn, the goal is to sort of provide a foundation so that there's an expression, but it's not so quick moving like a 9 would be. I would think a 9 would be okay, but it would have to be very well placed and also very well regulated, because 9 with his numbers could make the anxiety and the mental overwhelm and possible or likely mental fatigue even higher. So we want to make sure that we're not playing too heavily into the already anxious or sensitive energy that his numbers play in, and given that 8 would give more of that foundation. So really like those numbers. I would also say 3, an exalted 3 would be good, and like I said, 9 would be decent, but it would have to be really well regulated. Moving on to his first project, Black Swan was released March 14th 2017, which was a Tuesday. It has a psychic 5 simplified from that 14, a destiny 9 simplified from 18, and a name number 3 simplified from a 21. This was released in a personal 4-year but a universal 1-year. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like these numbers. Thinking about how strong his natal 2 is, of how it shows up in literally every single number, it has a lot of dominance. So having numbers that highlight that is good, and it's ironic because there's not really a lot of numbers that show that empathetic side. These are more confident, ambitious, forward-moving, forward-thinking, let's get this shit done numbers, which is great for our first project. Great for our first project. I feel like this was probably a little rocky for him, considering that it was a personal 4-year simplified from that 13. 1 is ruled by the sun, and 3 is ruled by Jupiter. Both of them are very ambitious. 3, as we know, larger than life. It likes to take what's there and make it bigger and better if it can. It's very optimistic, so you don't really get the bad side of it. It can be bad, don't get me wrong, it can be bad, but it's not the initial energy. 1 highlights this potentiality and this start and this beginning, this spark to this action, and then putting that behind a 4, which is ruled by Uranus in the North Node. And this is all about this personal year that he was in when this album came out. This personal 4, this 4 highlights this rebellion, this disruption, this chaos, and having all of that energy behind with that 1 and that 3 behind that push of that 4, it just makes this push even stronger. So I personally think that this is a great year for him to release. I only say that I know it was a rocky year because 4s are just like that. That's what 4 does. It's very disruptive. It's very jarring. It can be very, very shaky to the psyche, and you're sort of kind of just left like, well, what the fuck was that? But with it being having a supplementary 3, there is some luck involved. 3 is ruled by Jupiter, the planet of luck. So it makes complete sense that this turned out to be so good for him. I actually saw recently that a couple of songs off that project are getting awards or have hit marks, needless to say, of like they've gotten so many plays or so many sales that they're getting more notoriety. And this project came out in 2017, so that's absolutely great for, what is this now, 6 years later, for this project to still be having a heartbeat. Absolutely amazing. With that psychic 5, love the play into his destiny number, even though his psychic number was in the front seat. I would have liked to see a little bit more play into the psychic number, but I do understand why. I do understand why there wasn't a lot of play into the psychic number, and though I would have liked a little bit more of a something to go with it, or just even supplementary, just so that he still feels seen within the work, because that's my only concern with this project. And I want to say Noir also was released with his psychic number in the front seat. So with that being the case, I would have liked to see a little bit more of the shine of the 2. But the thing is, with 2, you don't really get a lot of push. And when you're having a project release, you want as much push as possible. It can be really hard to get your music out there. It can be really hard to get your art out there. So when you're working with numbers in a way to help you out, you want them to have as much push as possible. But if you have too much push, it can be very detrimental on the native. So with these numbers in the positions that they are, I wouldn't say it's the worst thing, but I also want to say the best thing for him, considering that Psychic 5, because I didn't finish that thought, that Psychic 5 simplified from that 14, that 1 highlights that potential, that start, that 4 highlights this disruption. So I feel like this is a very unique project in and of itself. It has this very intellectual, also 5 can have that earwormy vibe. It can also have this lyricism and this cadence and this flow that's like, damn, wait a minute, what you mean? And that's very much 5, especially when you have it in a psychic number of a project. It can really speak to the words that are said into a project, especially if it's in your natal numbers. That 5 will just magnetize everything, and it works out beautifully, which I feel like this has done, especially considering that Black Swan is doing so well. So love this placement of this 5. This Destiny 9 is ruled by Mars. It's simplified from that 18. This is definitely passion. There's a lot of passion here. There's a lot of courage, in a sense, courage and bravery, because 9 also highlights that. And this could have been one that he might have had some anxiety around, because considering how dominant these numbers are, this 5, this 9, and this 3 of the base numbers of this project, I feel like he might have been a little anxious trying to get this together or put it out, considering how his natal numbers are naturally introverted. So with that natural introversion, putting it with this very heavily extroverted energy, I feel like he was sort of kind of like, you want me to do what? Like, it might have shook him a little bit. But once he got his footing, he was sort of, I feel like it gave him it was a shock to the system, especially with it being a personal 4-year shock to the system. And then that 9 of the Destiny number, so long term, it has that drive, it has that push, it has that passion. So I feel like with time, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, I see why we did it like this. But initially, I feel like it was very jarring to the system. But that 8 definitely gives it that support for something that can be long-standing. It's not just a one and done type thing. 8 is ruled by Saturn, and it highlights a foundation of structure or security. So when you're putting it supplementary to support a number, you're put in a position where not only is the passion of 9 being passionate, it now has 8 to sort of kind of sustain that passion and give it sort of kind of like if you're running a marathon and you have people on the side giving you water or giving you a snack like mid-race. That's sort of kind of what 8's doing in this number. That's sort of kind of what 8 is doing here, sort of kind of just being like, hey, yeah, like, you got it, keep going. Because considering the fact of where the dominance lies with that 9 is that driving force, and 8 is sort of kind of sitting in the backseat, and it's not overpowering anything for real. It does make things take a little bit longer. So the fact that Black Swan is getting more notoriety. Lord Jesus, that word beat my ass. Anyways, maybe with now getting 6 years later more attention, that could be that 8 coming into play. But it's also not a bad thing, because he's kept up his art, he's kept up his creativity, he's kept doing what he's been doing, and it's been going great. So overall, I like this release a lot, because though the energy is so pushed, so forward moving, because considering the personal 4-year he was in, and then the universal 1 year that we were in universally at that year, it doesn't cause too much chaos long standing. I will say that it was a very jarring year, just off rip, just sort of kind of like a wait, what the fuck? And it's like a lot of things happening, a lot of shifts and twists and turns, just a whole lot of. It can be very intense, but overall, I think that it definitely speaks heavily towards his long-term success. Though it was jarring, it was also semi-grounding, especially with that 8 and 8 reflecting his 2, and it being a supplementary 8. It gives him that sense of, it's going to be okay. It just don't feel okay right now. So I wonder how how that played out for him. But overall, I would easily give this a 7 out of 10, just because first album, 2 is a number that you can get some support from, but you really got to play your cards right. My only concern that this might have been mentally and emotionally jarring for him, that could have really just shook him up in a bad way. And when I'm like doing this, I want to make sure that I'm not causing the native and any harm. Is the goal. It's always the goal to cause no harm. But if anything has to happen, very, very minimal impact. Very, very minimal impact is always the goal. But other than that, I really like this. So we're gonna move on to Noir. This project came out November 8th, 2018. This was a Thursday. This was a Pure Psychic 8, a Destiny 3 simplified from a 21, and a name number 6 simplified from a 15. This is a Universal 2-year simplified from 11, and a Personal 5-year simplified from a 14. So with the synchronicities between this project and the last project, considering the fact that, the last project was a Psychic number 5 simplified from a 14, and a name number 3? Yeah, name number 3 simplified from a 21. And those two numbers have carried over into this project. I'm like, okay, we're taking some energy from where it was before and start kind of recycling it a little bit. And it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. I really do like the Psychic 8 Pure Psychic 8, because it beautifully reflects his natal Psychic 8, or not Psychic 8, Psychic 2, beautifully reflects that Psychic 2. So there's this balance, this harmony, but also this depth and vulnerability. Like, it just digs in and sort of kind of is like, hey, come on in. Like, this is my soul right now. Go ahead and look at it. It's sort of kind of what it does. And with it being released on a Thursday, which is Jupiter ruled, and having a Destiny number 3, which is, again, Jupiter ruled, that alignment, it really helps that 8 expand, even though 3 and 8 don't necessarily get along with each other, considering the fact of where these numbers are placed. The 8 is definitely taking the dominance. 6 is sort of kind of sitting there and being like, oh, we're doing something. 6 is ruled by Venus. So when you put her in a number, or just in somebody's natal numbers or a project's natal numbers, it's sort of kind of just there unless there's something to help push it. And in this case, that 3 can push it a little bit. I will say that 3 can push it a little bit. And with that supplementary 1, there's more of a push, because if this was an exalted 6, which would be simplified from a 24, 2 is a very soft energy, can be very soft energy, whereas 4 can be a very erratic and chaotic and big disruptive energy. And then putting that into a 6 is sort of kind of just, it's sort of kind of internally shaky, but then 6 is just looking very directly at everything and being like, yes, I understand. It can be very analytical when it's that exalted 6. But with this 6 simplified from a 15 being the name number, it's something that's more analyzed because of that supplementary 5. It gives this need to inspect or research or divulge, if it is the right word, just really get into its business of being like, and how did you do this? Oh, tell me more about this. Oh, okay, yeah, I see. And then taking that information and finding the beauty in that. 6 is ruled by Venus, like we know, and that highlights beauty, that highlights art, that highlights creativity. So it makes a lot of sense if that's what's happening. With that Destiny 3, it's pushing a little bit more into that name number. So long term, I can definitely see that this is going to be fairly big with that Destiny 3, that 3 being that Jupiter. It's just going to get larger with time, especially if there's the proper promotion and marketing and just attention put on it. It will help out. But again, that Psychic 8, considering his natal numbers, it's actually helping and not hurting, in my opinion, because of that balance that you get between 2 and 8. As long as he is authentic and true to himself and he allows himself to be vulnerable, it's going to be fine, because that's what that reflection can highlight, is this vulnerability. Not only this balance, but this depth, the vulnerability, and just allowing yourself to go in deep and do the healing. So as long as he's doing that, it's going to be fine. But if he's not, and he's being avoidant, which this opposition can also, or this reflection can also highlight, if he's sort of kind of avoiding the work that he should be doing. It might not go so well. So I hope he does. And especially the fact that this project came out in a personal 5-year. It could have been a year that he was very much in his head. It could have been a year, especially with it being a universal 2-year and that personal 5-year, which is literally his natal numbers, just not the same supplementary numbers. So it's a little bit of a different energy, but it is very reminiscent of who he is at his core. So as long as he allowed himself to put it all in this project, of that vulnerability, of that depth, of that hidden, I'm not really trying to show y'all my soul, but hey, here it is. As long as he just allows that, it allows it the space to breathe, it should work out. And I really like, and if that's what he does, I love it. I would give this, again, a 7 out of 10, maybe even an 8 out of 10. Like, it's as long as he does what he's supposed to do. Like, the 8 and the 6 work really well together of this project. The 3 and the 6 of the project work well together. There's not any compatibility crosses. And sometimes that can help. Ironically enough, sometimes that little bit of tension can help somebody out. But I do really like the pure 8, considering he was a pure 2 at the time, because his destiny number hadn't taken over yet. This was the last full album before that, actually. So I'm not really mad at that. So I really like this project. Moving on to Love for Rent. Now, this was the first project that his destiny number was in the front seat. So the number regulation is going to be a little bit different. So when it comes to 8s, like the ones 1, 2, 3, and 5 can still work great. 8 can, if he did the work that he should have, because that's never going to do that. If he did the work that was being requested of him back when NOIR came out, it puts him in a position where that 8 can help with long-standing success. Now, if he was avoidant, that 8 can just make everything that he's feeling internally even heavier. So 8 can be good, but if you don't do what you're supposed to do, it can hurt like a bitch. So Love for Rent came out October, is that right? Is that the right year? October 28th. Right year, right month. I'm trying to remember what 10 stands for. October 28th, 2022, which was a Friday. This was a pure exalted 1 simplified from that 28, a destiny 8 simplified from a 17, and the name number 8 simplified from a 35. This is a universal 6-year and a pure 6-year and a universal pure 9-year. So this was last year, and this also means that he's in a he's in a personal 1-year, while we're in a universal 7-year, which I'll get to in a second. But this numerology is numerologying, and the numbers are very, very much numbering, and it's very complex. So the 8 already, with the 8s reflecting his natal numbers, and also 8 being the dominant number throughout all of these numbers, specifically that psychic destiny and name, and then 2 being the dominant number between all of his natal numbers, I would think that he did that introspection. Because if you're putting 8s so dominantly in a project, you know what you're doing, because this could shut somebody down real quick. This could end some stuff for some people. So I'm assuming, aggressive emphasis on the assume, that he's done what he's needed to do to finally release all of this internal tension. Because also, when you have 2 so dominantly in your natal numbers, it puts you in a position where you are very connected to family, you're very connected to community, connection, love, and bonding with people very aggressively. So this puts you in a position where it can be like, okay, I'm doing this for my family, I'm doing this for my people, or I'm doing this because I never had those things, I'm doing this it does like that. So when you have this natally, and then you put it in the reflection of 8, which is ruled by Saturn, it can give you those things, but it's not going to give you those things just to fuck it up. Like, 8 can be very, very picky with how it wants to share. It can share. It can. It seems like she's not going to, but she really can share. But it wants you to be at the best version, or at least a sustainable version, to be able to take the gift and maintain. It doesn't want you to just have the thing to have the thing. It's like, okay, you want this thing, I'm gonna give you this thing, but I don't want you to break the thing if I'm gonna give it to you. So it's very picky in that regard, but having it so dominantly placed, it's supplementary in the psychic number, but it is literally the dominant number of the destiny and name number. With that being the case, I feel like he's doing what he's supposed to do, and he's like, yeah, I want this long term. I've seen what I've seen, I've done what I've done, I've heard what I've heard. I want this long term, and I feel like it's very important for him to connect with people with this reflection going on, which I really hope he has a really good relationship with his fans and the people who support him. And I hope when he meets people, he's very friendly, which I would assume he is, considering those psychic twos or just those natal twos. But things don't always be what they seem, so don't quote me to that. But with this psychic one, psychic exalted one, it gives it a confidence, but also that empathy and that vulnerability that I've been talking about this entire time, because 2 and 8 do reflect each other. And when you have 28 in your numerology or in any of your charts, it highlights that need to go in deep. So I feel like, considering also the fact that the title is Love for Rent, it's highlighting that depth. It's highlighting, hey, I've done the work, and now I'm going to show off the work I've done. And I really like that. I think that's cute. I think that's kind of hot. So I'm not really mad at it. With that Destiny 8, simplified from a 17, it highlights this depth and this introspection and this discovery, emphasis on this discovery and introspection, especially with that supplementary 7. 7 is ruled by Neptune and the South Node, so it can go in deep if it wants to, and it typically wants to. It can be fairly overindulgent, but with it being a dominant 8, it can be a little bit more tame, or it can sort of kind of give it that stability to be like, hey, let's practice our boundaries now. Let's not do too much. You calm down, take a breather. This sort of kind of what that 8 is doing for that 7. But it definitely highlights a new level of self-discovery. So I really, really like this Destiny 8 for him. Considering that his Destiny number 5 was in the front seat at this time, this 8 can help with that, the mental health aspects of that 5. Now, this always concerns me just a little bit, of the mental health aspects that can happen when you combine 5 and 7. But other than that, because 7 can be very overindulgent and very analytical and very it's very research-y, and it's like, I want to know every little detail of this. And 5 is that same way, but will take, they both sort of kind of are obsessively I need to know. And that combined with itself can be very chaotic very quickly. And I just don't want that to happen and hurt or cause harm to somebody. It can, if it's natally, it can be a little bit easier to navigate because that's where you're coming from natally. But when you put in a project, or you put your numbers with a project's numbers, and that's what's happening, it can be a little wonky. So yes. Moving forward, it can be good. I do think it's okay for him in this regard, considering the fact that his Destiny number is now in the front seat and the numbers of his previous projects. It does seem like there's a growth, and 8 also highlights that growth. And the name number 8, simplified from a 35, it highlights this popularity again with that 3. It highlights this expansion, this luck, this optimism as well. Now, 8, everybody thinks that Saturn ain't got a heart. I disagree with that, but that's a conversation for another day. But with 8 being this dominant, this authoritative energy, when you have 3 and 5 behind it. Now, 3 and 5 work really well together, in my opinion, because of the multiples or pattern 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. They sit right next to each other, so there's a little bit of a similarity of sorts. 3 and 5 both are very intellectual numbers. They both are like, ooh, tell me more. I would like to understand. This is very intriguing to me. Yes. Oh, and that means, okay. I understand. Ooh. They're very, very inquisitive numbers, needless to say. So when you put it in a position where it's creating this 8 energy, that 3 being the first number in that supplementary number and versus being a 53, that 3 being that initial energy highlights this push into something bigger, and then 5 highlights this adventure and this discovery of that thing, and then 8 is like, oh, so we looking, what we looking at? Okay, let's keep looking then. So it's like it's taking this desire to expand, this desire to discover, and being like, okay, I want to keep doing this. I want to keep diving in. I want to keep exploring. I want to keep going. Is that 8? And it's moving very steadily. And the reason why I do like 8 for him, especially if the work has been done or the work is being done, it helps slow things down, because 5 can be very erratic and restless, and so can 3, especially when they're paired up. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 can be very erratic, and I'm very restless and being like, I gotta know, I gotta go, I gotta be and just really all over the place. And 8 can just be like, we're gonna sit down, and everybody's like, whoa, that's an option. Wait, what? So it can help out. So I really do like actually the dominance of these 8s, because it will put him in a position where long standing, it will just keep going and keep building as he dives into this authenticity of himself. So overall, I would give this like an 8 out of 10. Like this is definitely one of the better releases, or one of my favorite releases, just because of this. You can see the growth in his numbers. You can see how he started with Black Swan, of just being like, okay, boom, we out here. We're doing it. And sort of kind of like numerologically, you can see the sort of kind of internal instability of being like, ooh, wait, how do I can I press this? Should I not press it? Ooh, I don't know if I should do that. That don't seem smart. And then you have a little bit more of a, okay, I'm figuring it out with Noir. It's just like, okay, I'm getting there. We're getting somewhere. Finding our footing. We're doing something. Not sure what it is yet, but we're gonna get there. And then you get this dominance of this 8 in this love for Ren, being like, hey, we fucking did it. We fucking did it. And it's lit. I'm loving it. It's fire. And I really see that. So I would definitely give Love for Rent a 8 out of 10, even maybe a 9 out of 10, just because I'm seeing how much he's grown. It's like numerologically in the project releases, you can tell that this is not the same person that they were when they started doing the shit that he's doing. Like, he's not the same person anymore. And you can see that growth in these numbers. And I absolutely love that, especially with the use of these 8s and how they're so subtly placed throughout, or not even, they're not subtly placed throughout, but how they show a maturity that has been gained with time. And I really love that for him. And I also feel like this also highlights into his mental health as well. So I really, really love this. Now, in regards to the fact that he's in a personal 1 year and we're on a universal 7 year, thinking about his numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 5, and 7 do sit next to each other. So there's some intrigue right there. We are in that personal or universal 7 year, and with that being this being his personal 1 year, we're starting a new phase, starting a new something's beginning, something's starting. There's a potential, there's a possibility or multiple possibilities, actually, because considering that this personal 1 is simplified from a 10, that 1 is ruled by the sun and that 0 is ruled by Pluto. So there's this intensity, but it can be fairly subtle or it can be very blatant. So, because like the thing is, 1 can be very bright and illuminate everything, but it can also sometimes want to turn off the fucking lights. It's like, bitch, make it black. Make it darker than dark. The darkest dark that you could ever dark is sometimes how 1 be. And that intensity of that 0 with Pluto, with it being Pluto ruled, can definitely show up. So this can definitely be a very potent year for him. He might get more into his spiritual bag, considering this is a universal 7 year, but also working on his relationship with money and stability and things along those lines would definitely be something that I feel like would come up, especially with the 8s that he's starting to use, and that reflection between 2 and 8. He's really trying to figure out how to take what he's learned from his younger years and prior ages of life and be like, okay, how can I make this help me long term, which is what that 8 highlights. So I'm really loving this. This was fun for me, and I hope you enjoyed it. So make sure you share your thoughts on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok, and tag me at Your Soul Lab or at Numbers with Ishtakari, and share it with Smino and some of his fans. And if you like this episode is inspired by my personal numerology breakdown and my You and Your Career service, which you can check out on my site, yoursolaboratory.com, and book your free consult while you're there. And yeah, so thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.